You're walking down the street, and the sun feels warm on your skin, but you don't feel it, because in your mind, you're somewhere else. Not quite the past, but not exactly the future. You're replaying a moment that never happened, or maybe you're rewriting one that did. Your face stays still, but inside, a whole life is unfolding. You say the perfect words. Someone finally understands. The silence? It feels cinematic. And the version of you in that world? Softer, sharper, more alive. I know this place. The one where you're not just watching your life, you're editing it in real time, where every missed opportunity gets a second take, where you fall in love, win arguments, save yourself. And I know what it's like when no one sees that version of you, the one who lives in the spaces between. And then you blink, back to reality. You forgot where you were walking to. But that world, it's not imaginary. It's a real neurological state, and it says more about your mind than you think. If this sounds like you, this video is for you. Welcome to the Synaptic Soul Diary, a soft space between science and self, where your inner world is both studied and sacred. Today, we're exploring the quiet truth behind daydreaming and why your tendency to get lost in your own head might not be a weakness at all. Because daydreaming is not a flaw, it's the brain's way of metabolizing emotion, testing identities, and building bridges to possible futures. And those stories in your head, they're not meaningless. They're data, sacred, messy, revealing, showing you the shape of what you truly need. So if you've ever been told you're too spacey, too dramatic, or not present enough, you're not alone. And there's more going on in your mind than anyone sees. Neuroscience sees daydreaming not as a mental glitch, but as your brain's natural storytelling mode, where identity, memory, and imagination come together. When your eyes lose focus and your thoughts start to drift, a specific system in your brain turns on, the default mode network, or DMN. First discovered by neurologist Marcus Raichle, this network lights up not when you're focused on tasks, but when you're seemingly doing nothing. It includes parts like the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and temporoparietal junction, regions associated with memory, introspection, and self-awareness. But what happens during this doing nothing? When you catch yourself lost in thought, your brain is backstage, working on something profoundly human. First, your brain builds who you are. Not by collecting facts, but by returning to the moments that shaped you in order to form your identity. This is why you wander back through old conversations, childhood memories, things you regret, things you miss. Each time something shifts. You see them differently through the eyes of who you are now. The default mode network works like an emotional editor. It revisits the past and gives it shape, assigning meaning to moments that once felt unfinished. It helps you learn from what hurt, instead of being haunted by it. Without this process, your life would feel like scattered scenes with no clear thread. But this quiet revisiting creates continuity. It gives you a story to live inside and a main character to become. Besides this, your brain rehearses the future. The DMN helps you emotionally prepare for what hasn't happened yet. If you have felt your thoughts drifting forward to what could happen, what you might say, where it all might go, know that these imagined futures are, rather than fantasy, emotional rehearsals. You try on outcomes to feel their weight before they arrive. A moment of success, a moment of loss, the chance you almost took. Your brain is walking through it all in advance, letting you feel the risk in a safe space. We don't just fantasize about the what-ifs, we test drive them first, in quiet spaces of imagination. Lastly, your brain sparks insight and feeling. Creativity and emotional clarity thrive when you're unfocused. In the space between memory and imagination, something else begins to light up. You're distracted, yet your brain is weaving. A lyric from a song collides with a memory from years ago, and suddenly, a new idea forms. Insight doesn't come when you chase it. It slips in when you're drifting. And while the mind wanders, the heart starts to speak. Feelings that never had space begin to rise, gently. It's where grief reshapes itself, where silence gives voice to what was never said. You imagine closure, you imagine softness. Daydreaming becomes a quiet place where ideas form and emotions finally land. According to researcher Kalina Christoph, creativity reaches its peak when the default mode network links up with the brain's executive control network, the region responsible for focus, planning, and intentional thought. This suggests that daydreamers might actually be better at switching between getting lost in thought and focusing in when it matters than the average person. Think of every shower thought that solved a problem, or a walk that delivered a sudden answer. That was your default mode network, scripting quietly behind the scenes. Drawing from the work of Kalina Christoph, it becomes clear, a mind that drifts is a mind in motion. So through the neuroscience perspective, daydreaming is how your brain tells your story, sketching out moments, rewriting meaning, and deciding what comes next. Psychology sees daydreaming less as a storytelling engine and more as a safety instinct, the mind's way of building shelter when the outer world feels dangerous, cold, or too quiet to bear. When a child grows up unseen, unheard, or unloved, imagination steps in like an emergency architect. It builds rooms of warmth, applause, and control, a private place where you are held, chosen, and finally seen. Over time, those inner rooms can start to feel safer, sometimes even richer, than the hallway of real life. Daydreaming becomes more than escape. It becomes structure, a secret place where the nervous system exhales and the self begins to take shape. But what protects us can also isolate us. Psychologist Eli Sommer named one extreme of this pattern: maladaptive daydreaming. Sprawling, immersive fantasies that act as emotional lifelines when reality feels unbearable. This isn't just zoning out, it's coping in disguise. If you couldn't cry without punishment, the mind imagines arms that hold you. If no one ever said, "I'm proud of you," an inner audience rises and claps. These imagined scenes regulate what the body couldn't safely express. And yet, the more vivid the fantasy, the harder it can be to leave. What begins as shelter can become a maze, comforting but lonely, a double edge, connection imagined, but time passing without the real thing. In other words, the mind starts to prefer the world it imagined. In maladaptive daydreaming, people describe losing hours to inner stories, skipping meals, struggling to sleep, feeling frustrated with real relationships because the imagined ones feel more fulfilling. The life inside your head grows rich, while the one outside it stays on pause. That doesn't mean the story should be silenced. It means the story needs integration. And if you can carry those pieces back into the real world, what you wanted, what you rehearsed, what you imagined feeling, then the story becomes a blueprint. You just have to want to follow it. Still, we don't only imagine to get away. We imagine to expand. Through narrative identity, psychologists have shown that we become who we are by interpreting our experiences over time. In the 1970s, psychologist Jerome Singer, often called the father of daydreaming research, did more than just theorize. At Yale, he developed the Imaginal Processes Inventory, a 344-item questionnaire given to hundreds of participants to study how we drift inward. His data revealed a category he called positive constructive daydreamers, people whose inner worlds were vivid, emotionally rich, and often future-focused. These weren't idle distractions. They were simulations, rehearsals for identity. Singer's studies, including one from 1961, showed that these daydreamers scored higher in creativity and had more complex, layered self-concepts. In his 1975 book, The Inner World of Daydreaming, he argued that some of our deepest self-building doesn't happen in action, but in imagination. Through the psychological lens, daydreaming is adaptation, the mind's quiet attempt to stay whole. When the world withholds a story, the imagination writes one anyway. Philosophers, on the other hand, have long argued that imagination and daydreaming are a form of knowing, not escapism, but insight, a remembering of the soul's truth buried beneath surface reality. Plato's allegory of the cave describes people chained inside a dark cavern, mistaking the shadows on the wall for reality. But once one of them turns inward and upward, they begin to see the real world behind the illusions. In this light, daydreaming might be the first flicker of that upward turn, the moment we begin to sense that the shadows aren't enough. Carl Jung would agree. He believed that images from dreams and daydreams weren't fantasies, but messages from the soul. He called them echoes from the collective unconscious, symbolic truths that arrive when words fall short. In his words, the images of the unconscious place a great responsibility upon a man. They cannot be ignored. They call to us from the darkness. Plato once wrote, "The visible realm should be likened to the prison dwelling, and the light of the fire to the power of the sun." Said differently, what we see is only the surface. It's the imagination that loosens the chains, allowing us to turn toward the source of light. And this raises a deeper question. What if the worlds we visit when we drift aren't imagined, but remembered? Not remembered in the traditional sense, but as archetypal truths that live in the psyche, older than language. Maybe that version of you, the one that shows up in daydreams, whole and glowing and unafraid, isn't fiction. It's a mirror, held up by the unconscious, showing you the shape of your becoming. You know this place, the scene you see again and again, the version of yourself you meet when no one's watching. It's not just a fantasy, it's the soul, holding up a picture and asking, "Do you remember her?" As Jung wrote, your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. In many mystical traditions, imagination is sacred. Sufis call it the alam al-mithal, the imaginal realm, a bridge between the physical world and the divine. Not illusion, not metaphor, a real space where the unseen speaks. Even the philosopher Henri Corbin believed that imagination is how we access truth that rationality cannot grasp. The image becomes a vessel, a way for meaning to move through us without needing to be explained. Through this philosophical lens, daydreaming is revelation and remembering, Not an escape from the cave, but the moment you realize there's a way out. A vision not seen with the eyes, but when you touch it, the world begins to remember too. Taken together, these three lenses reveal something deeper. What if your dreams aren't distractions? What if they're reminders? What if your imagination is the first place your truth reveals itself before the world catches up? We return to certain stories, certain faces, certain feelings, again and again, not because we invented them, but because some part of us recognizes them. Maybe you're not making things up. Maybe you're remembering forward. So when you imagine a version of yourself, more whole, more at peace, perhaps that's not fantasy. Perhaps it's you. And in those imagined moments, vague, blurry, symbolic, we sometimes find the clearest mirror of who we are and who we were always meant to become. When you notice yourself slipping mid-conversation or staring past the moment, don't yank yourself back. Pause, soften your gaze, and breathe once. Ask gently, what scene is opening for me? What feeling does it carry? What part of me needed to visit that place? What did she want me to feel or remember? Let the image play for a single breath. Name whatever it brings, comfort, warning, longing, and let her speak. Then return to the room carrying that small message. This was a fragment from the Synaptic Soul Diary. If this moves something in you, let it be felt in a like, a comment, or by subscribing. That's how this story finds more hearts like yours. Turn the page. I'll meet you there.